So usually when I'm holding my camera, I'm holding it with my left hand, actually. A lot of other cameras, you hold it with your right hand most of the time. But if you hold it with your right hand most of the time, that means you're not ready to start focusing, pre-focusing on where it is at the distance of how far you're focusing away when you're zone focusing. And that's kind of the thing about the M10 is that you should be interested in zone focusing.
So if you think zone focusing is unnecessary because there is very high-tech autofocusing these days, you're wrong, kind of. First, so what is zone focusing? Zone focusing is to pre-focus your camera manually to a certain distance. We want to control what's in focus, as in, do we want the foreground in focus? Do we want the middle ground in focus, or do we want the background in focus?
You can focus on point to point and get that exact, focus spot, of course, but this camera is really designed, to zone focus. So I hold it with my left hand. I have my finger on my tab right there. And then even before I bring my right hand up, I'm pre-focusing right here with this pointer finger. It's like, okay, something's gonna be over there that I want. I'm focusing into right there to about, what's that? 7, 8 o'clock, right? And then I'm pulling up my camera and I'm taking the shot. So I'm kind of already focused before the camera comes up to my eye. Something closer, somebody's coming over here, somebody's coming over here, take the shot, and that's how I roll, left-handed. Okay, so now I want to talk about some real stuff when it comes to the Leica M system in general. Not just the Leica M10, but the Leica M system in general. M2, M3, M4, you name it. The M240, it doesn't matter. The M system, it's rangefinder, right? So I feel that with a Leica rangefinder M camera, it fits to a particular style of photographer. I'm not talking about even a particular style of photograph. I'm talking about photographer. And that means that you have to make the decision yourself as a photographer about the kind of photos you're taking and how you're taking those photos. And when it comes to using a Leica M rangefinder, I think that it is geared towards people who are primarily doing street photography, not exclusively, but primarily doing street photography. And the type of street photography where you are getting multiple layers in your frame, you are, working on the distance from you to the subject, and thinking about things a little bit more three-dimensionally. You have to practice. You have to practice with this camera. This is not a camera that you pick up and the next day you start shooting and you're good at it. No, it took for me, also with my Leica M2, it took me about a year to get to where I'm at right now, where I can just, focus by feel, have that depth perception, that distance perception that I was never good at, distance perception of like how far this and that away is. I know this might sound pretentious, but I think that a lot of photographers out there, sometimes they'll shoot a little bit more two-dimensionally, and that's great because there are certain photographs where you want them to look a little bit more 2D, and that's fine, but then there's photographs where you want to have a little bit more of a dynamic feel of distance in your photo. And that's where I think that the Leica M system really shines for that kind of photographer who's looking for that kind of photo. I wanted the bikes to converge together, but one bike went another way and one bike went another way. It didn't even make sense, but that's what happens. Sometimes people go where you don't want them to go. You didn't think they're gonna go. That's street photography. And so basically what I'm trying to say is I think it's good for photographers who are shooting lenses more stop down. And I feel like it kind of helps people who want to shoot at f8, f11 like I do. And I, as a photographer, at this stage in my photographic career, I don't really shoot wide open a lot. I actually shoot very stop down. I do shoot wide open sometimes if I'm doing a street portrait, but a lot of times I am closed down, I'm stopped down. I like to have as much sharp in focus in my photos as possible. I don't know, what do you think about the M system and how do you think that it fits you and it doesn't fit you?
Okay, so I shot with an M6, solely on an M6 actually, for like 3 years, I think. And then I moved to more modern cameras, I would say. I used the QP, but you know, it has autofocus, you know, lower f-stops, and then DSLRs and small point and shoots, whatever. And I think a lot of the points that you mentioned are pretty true. Like, you know, although technically, like, you can do anything you want with these cameras. Honestly, like, you can shoot in any style you want, but then it doesn't force you. But I think it does kind of like create a framework of a type of shooting for you.
Yes.
And rangefinders do that.
Right.
Definitely.
You have the frame lines, so it's telling you to focus on what is out of frame too as well.
Yes, and what I've noticed a lot with looking at people's photographs, and then sometimes I could recognize like, oh, this guy shoots on a Leica or rangefinder. And I think primarily a lot of the time what that gets like kind of boiled down into is what you mentioned of like, usually they're shooting at f8 or f11, and a lot of it it's really well composed.
Sure.
Straight up, shot on, you know, everything's perfect. Maybe there's a subject right in the middle. Maybe there's like a few, you know, people on the edge of the frames, you know, maybe there's some layering, and it's like, that starts to get really, really recognizable. Perhaps that is good photography. At the same time, what I realized through shooting different cameras and looking at different photographer styles as well, not only looking at like photographers that are 80 or 90 years old or dead, is that also creates a notion of like less experimentation, in my opinion.
Yes, that's true as well. That is kind of a negative thing that I think is true about the M10 and M anything.
Yeah. Also, like, it creates like this kind of like weird culture of like, this is what a good photograph is.
Yes.
Right, where it's like
it creates a standard.
It does.
Yes.
It does. And
yes.
no knock on anyone, but like, I personally found that like getting out of that system really helped me innovate a little bit more. But I think also being in that system also helped create such a good like fundamental foundation of like composition and understanding of photography.
Yes.
So like, it's hard to really like say that it's not a good system. It really helps a lot, but I feel like it doesn't benefit everyone as much as they think it might.
Yes. I completely agree, and that's why I say about like the M system fits a particular style of photographer. And it's true. You can take any kind of photo you like with any kind of camera you like almost. But this system, like, it fits me in particular at this stage in my life. And I don't know, maybe in the future then I will find it restricting in that way, like you were saying. And then that's when I can jump on a Q or a SL, which I think some people that are doing portraits, for example, maybe they would benefit more from an SL, like a SL. If what you're looking for is a Leica, and you want like the Leica because you like the brand and you like the build quality and those kind of things, I think there's a lot of photographers that they think that they want the M, but actually what they want is a Q or an SL, and they haven't come to that truth about them as a photographer and how they shoot and what they want to shoot. Right?
That's a good point,
Yeah. And I think that someone like you that has a Q, if you look at Ulysses' photos and you know that he has a Q, I think actually it does make sense for you. And then you look at my photos and then it does make sense that I have an M.
True.
So
yes,
it is very apparent in that way.
It does influence you in certain ways.
Yes. What helped me out with learning distances is because I'm American and I think in feet. I know meters, but feet is still easier for me to understand. So I'm about 6 feet tall. So if I were to lay down on the ground, actually from me to the camera right now, that's about 6 feet. And so I think about like how many me's are equal to, you know, where I'm focusing. So yeah, if this is 6 feet right now, I'm gonna do to about this position right here, which is like a 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock-ish. But then like double me is gonna be more like a 6 or a 7 o'clock position. Or right in the middle, somewhere around there, you know. And then if you're at f8, f11, I mean, then the room for error is quite large, actually. So that's when practicing really, you can see your progression because you're seeing exactly how much in focus you're getting as you keep shooting throughout the months and the year that you first have a rangefinder camera. So it takes time. A lot of people, I think, they get a Leica M camera and they have it for like a month or two or whatever, and it just doesn't vibe with them, it doesn't jam with them, and they give up, they sell it maybe, you know. But you gotta keep working at it. You gotta put in the work. When it comes to shooting wide open with a rangefinder, how do you feel about shooting wide open with a rangefinder? Because I find that it is difficult, and that the difficulty comes with your ability to also recognize distance, and not just the focus patch and how good you are at seeing what's sharp in the focus patch, but actually recognizing the distance, and especially if it's a dynamic situation where speed is involved, being able to focus by feel or focus, you know, as much as possible before you bring the viewfinder up to your eye, and then focusing, you know, with the patch. That whole process, if you're shooting wide open, is difficult. How do you feel? Because you shot an M for longer than me.
Yeah, and I've done like fashion portraits with it too.
Right.
And okay, I think this is gonna get like super nerdy, but I think if you have like if you're gonna shoot like stop down, especially like lower than f2.8 or something like that, it depends on your focal length too, obviously.
Yeah.
And you're shooting very specific like portraits of like maybe you want to shoot like razor sharp on the eye or something like that.
Yeah.
Then definitely like you first of all you need a calibrated rangefinder patch.
It needs to be calibrated. Really, that is a negative thing. Is that if the rangefinder calibration is off or your lens is off, either one
it just doesn't
can
work.
Be uncalibrated properly.
Yeah.
I've had lenses that I borrowed from a friend, and the lens itself wasn't calibrated correctly. So when I put it on my M, which I know is calibrated perfectly, I couldn't focus through the rangefinder patch at all. It's a 75 millimeter lens, and I couldn't focus it through the rangefinder patch. That's a huge negative.
Yeah, that's just not going to work.
Yeah, so that calibration,
But at the same time, like, if the calibration's perfect, I actually kind of like shooting like razor sharp, like low f-stop portraits on the M because it helps you control like that very slight focusing, which obviously you can do, you know, on a DSLR with manual focusing and whatnot. But like, it just feels a little bit more. You can adjust, like micro adjust it a little bit more with the rangefinders, which I like. Yeah.
So you don't really have a problem with shooting wide open so much. You don't think it's such a big deal.
Not much, but you can't do it when the subject's moving though. That's the thing.
Like if the subject is moving.
So if it's like for like still portraits,
right?
With like, for example, like if you have like a specific concept in mind, where it's like her eye is going to be there, and I'm going to shoot the eye, or it's like something like that. That's fine. But if someone's moving, then just fucking give it up, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Practice, practice, practice. That's why I like this camera too. It's a challenge. It gives me challenge. It's not easy, like an autofocus camera. An autofocus camera, you're gonna get more reliable photos perhaps. It's gonna be safer. You know, maybe your hit rate is more, but is that fun for you? For me, it's not as fun. So this camera is very fun because it's challenging. Yeah, and then when a subject is moving, if it's nighttime, personally, I will try not to go, you know, more open than like f4.
Yeah.
Even at night. And I think even if I think about the photograph and I have to stop or I have to go more wide open, to f2 or f2.8, then it's because there's not enough light in the scene. And if there's not enough light in the scene, perhaps it's because it's not a good photograph in the first place.
Very true.
So that's when, yeah,
That's a
I
good
kind
point.
of questioned myself, like, wow, I really have to be at f2 right now to get a good photograph. Maybe it's not a photograph that fits my style, my shooting
I like that statement.
capability.
I
So,
like that.
Exactly. So
Yeah, that's
that
a
is a statement.
That's true. That's super true.
yeah.
I don't know if this should be put in a video, but like
Yeah.
that's a really good point where it's
But
like,
it's okay because I want this to be a video that's about more than just like, oh yeah, high dynamic range is good or
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
Like it's a good sensor. It's a good sensor. And but
yeah.
besides that,
That's what I felt, especially when like people just start like super nerding out about like ISO performance.
yeah.
And it's like, well, if you need to go to like 1,000,000 ISO, it's like,
Is it a good photograph
there's
still?
no light in the first place. Like,
Yeah,
it's-
like why would you need that much ISO range?
yeah, it's like maybe it's interesting in terms of like technical like leverage and what perhaps what it can provide as from like a technical standpoint to photography, but like is it a pleasant photograph to look at? Like perhaps not, I guess. So that's a really good point. Yeah, yeah.
Is that if your camera is good at 1 million, I mean, can do 1 million, that means the 6,000 is probably very nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Right.
that's a point.
yeah.
That's a point. If your camera has super high ISO range, then it means the lower ranges are going to be better. That is true. Yeah, personally, like if I'm taking a photo and it's like ISO even like 6400, then I always like in the end when I get home and I'm looking at it in post, and I'm like, huh, ISO 6400, man, that's kind of high. I can see a little noise. Do I mind the noise? I don't mind the noise, but the fact that the noise is there is proving a point to me that maybe the lighting situation wasn't good in the first place.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't waste my time trying to polish a turd. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
But ISO 6400 is okay. I like
Yeah.
ISO 6400.
yeah,
Even 12,800, I like it. But it's the point is what I'm trying to make is different.
I agree. I think it's
Yeah.
just the fact that there's a lack of contrast already
Yeah.
in the nature of the photograph.
Right,
So
right.
I agree.
Thank you, Ulysses.
Yes.
Thank you for this segment. I appreciate it. All right, on to the next one. Okay, so next thing I want to talk about is lenses. It's so awkward too when I'm talking on the street and there's other people around and then I finish talking and it's like awkward silence. Everybody's looking at me.